Moisture is the #1 enemy of buildings. In warm climates, it shortens surface life expectancy through erosion and sets up conditions for mold, algae, and lichen growth. In cold climates, moisture also freezes in surfaces, leading to expansion, contraction, and ultimately failure. X4 is a professional-grade water-repellent sealant for both interior and exterior building materials, including brick, stone, mortar, aggregate, stucco, concrete, composite materials, and even grout. Additionally, X4 resists acids, alkalis, salts, and even graffiti, and it can even be mixed with paint to make surfaces washable. Use is simple. Just apply X4 to most surfaces, allow it to dry, and enjoy year-round maintenance-free protection. To ensure best performance over time, a simple test can be used to measure moisture resistance and guarantee maximum performance. X4 is available as single gallons, 4x1 gallon cases, and 5-gallon pails. Prepare for winter and purchase X4 today at EnviroGuardDirect.com. And if you have questions, get factory direct support by calling 828-548-3900. All right, so good morning, everybody, and happy Veterans Day. We just want to thank every one of you veterans out there today for your service to our country, and thank you for everything that you do, everything you've done. So it's been a minute since we had a live stream like this, and we are in our Back to Basics series. So if you saw our video earlier this week, we touched on the assessment. Now, we mentioned as part of that the S.E.T sales process. So I want to take a minute just to kind of give you an outline of everything so you understand contextually how this, why this is important in your business, okay? And let me take you back to Market Makers months ago, where we asked the question from the group at the time, are you, do you want to own your job, right? Are you self-employed, or are you building a business that is scalable? And if you're building a business that's scalable, systems are essential, okay? And part of that system is having a sales process in place that doesn't just rely upon you as the owner of the business or you as the sales manager in the business to grow sales over time. So that's the context that we're speaking from, is a owner of a business, a manager of a business that is scaling that business over time. So there are two major portions to the S.E.T sales process. The first is the assessment itself, which we're going to really focus on today, that has 4 steps to it. And those steps, let me make sure I have my notes here in front of me so I don't forget anything, are going to be the interview, clarity for the day's visit, the inspection, and then finally the accomplished list, okay? But the second phase of the S.E.T sales process is to educate and then to schedule the job. And that's the closing phase of everything, all right? So I'm not going to talk today about anything having to do with the closing phase. By the time we get to the closing phase, all the questions should be answered for your customer. They shouldn't have additional questions. It just becomes about educating them. It becomes about scheduling everything, of course, providing them with an estimate, etc. But we're not going to talk about that today. Today, we're going to focus on the assessment phase of the S.E.T sales process because it's essential not only for giving you a repeatable pattern to do everything, but also to put you in a great position from an education standpoint with the customer to build that relationship so that you are the expert in the room and differentiated from your competitors, because very few people are going to do anything like this. And then when it comes time to close the sale, it's just a natural process. There's no pressure on you to close, quote unquote, okay? So let's do this. Occasionally, I'm going to be sharing different areas of my screen, and this one is going to start out by looking at the interview. Now, if you have questions as we go along, ask those questions. We've got a chat area here on YouTube for a reason. Please feel free to use it at any time. Throw those questions up there. Grace, who's sitting across from me, will make sure that I get those questions answered. And before I start this, big thanks to Grace Morris. If you haven't met her yet, she is our new director of marketing at EnviroGuard, and everything that you've seen up to now, the introduction, the video, and everything has been produced by her exclusively, and she is a fantastic addition to the team. You're going to be learning more about her soon and how she can work with you on the tools that you need to close more business as well. So let's start with the interview. So what is the interview used to do? It's used to put yourself in your customer's shoes and understand where they're coming from, right? It's if you can't relate to your customer, if your customer doesn't feel like simpatico with you, right? Then it's going to be difficult for them to feel comfortable when it comes to the closing phase. So this is the time to bring down the walls and realize that it's not you on the other side of the table from them. It's you sitting next to them and helping them to identify and understand the problems that they called you in to solve, but from their standpoint. So we're going to talk about the different questions in this. And by the way, every assessment can either be directly related to the area that service is taking place or the service itself. So the assessment that we're going to use today is a focus on mold and then crawl spaces and basements. If we were going to focus on odor in living spaces, then we would use a different assessment guide altogether for that. Okay. And the reason I say that is I want to encourage you to talk with us and to use the support@enviroguarddirect.com email address, or to call us directly at 828-548-3900. And let's talk about maybe what assessment guide you need to make your sales process and the assessment side of your sales process really flourish within your business. Okay. So if we don't have an assessment guide, in other words, we'll help you build one just for your needs. Right. So getting back to this one, talking crawl spaces and basements for a moment, focusing on mold, you'll notice that the first couple questions begin with, when was the home built? Well, why do we ask that question? Let me just take it from my perspective. The home that I live in, our home, was built in 2005, but we only moved to this area 5.5 years ago. So when you asked, if you were interviewing me and asking me that question, I would say, well, our house was built in 2005. I've only been here for about 5.5 years. And what does that tell you as the person going through the assessment? It tells you they probably don't know everything about their home, right? There's still things, because I didn't build it new, that I'm discovering about our home. I know that the wall panels, from an insulation and structural standpoint, are SIPS panels. I know that our roof is a SIPS roof, right? I know that we have shingles. But every now and then you run into something that's surprising, and that becomes part of the inspection process later on, that you may make some discovery for your own customers that they didn't realize. And it's like, oh, no wonder we're having drafty floors or whatever that might be. Okay. So realize that these questions are being asked with intent. But understanding the intention behind each question is very important. So that's why we're going through this today. The next one is, how long have you lived here? That ties together, right? So I said, I've lived in our home for 5.5 years. You, as the interviewer of me, would then be able to put 2 and 2 together and really understand. Okay, so and you might have a follow-up question here. Remember, this is a guide, but it's not meant to be the end-all be-all. It's conversational. So if I'm interviewing you, it might be, so you've lived here for 5.5 years. It was built back in 2005. Are there some things that you've discovered maybe recently that you didn't know about the house? Or there's some questions that you have about the house that while I am going through the inspection process, I can maybe help uncover for you, right? Again, you're sitting side by side at the table. You're not across from them. This is meant to break down the barriers, break down the walls of communication, okay? Next question is, have you noticed, how long do you plan to live here? Now, we all know that real estate transactions are a major part of all of our businesses, right? We interact with our customers and are always talking through situations, how budget impacts service, how time impacts service. How long do you plan to live here is going to tell you one of two things. They may want to make a long-term investment in that property. And then that's what you're gearing your services to later on. That's what you're gearing your inspection around. They may be selling this month, right? They may be putting the house on the market immediately. Or if it's commercial property, they may be putting the property on the market immediately and preparing for that. So understanding what they plan to do with the property here is essential. The fourth question that we're going to ask is, have you noticed cold floors or drafts? Now, that can go to a lot of other things when we're actually in the inspection process. And for certain people, this may begin to tee up some other services that you're able to do. So, for example, if you are into installing insulation in crawl spaces, basements, things of that nature, and preventing, dew point issues in the wintertime, in the summertime, preventing drafts, things like that, then this is your cup of tea, right? Because you want to start asking these questions and understanding, is there anything that you are noticing about the property that we might be able to help you with? So that's why we ask that question. And then we get into the question of, have you seen any mold upstairs yet? Okay, because remember, we're in a basement and crawl space assessment right now. So upstairs is the living area. Why do we use the word yet? Well, it implies that if you haven't seen it up here yet, it's coming, right? It's only a matter of time. So there are certain terms that we're going to go into, and we're going to use that word yet over and over again because we do want to imply that, right? If 50% of the air that we breathe, let's say in a crawl space and probably a basement as well, is from those areas, well, then it's very important that we take care of the problem while it's just in that area before it persists in other areas of the home. So yet becomes an important question. I would encourage you that as you get started using this assessment guide, use it the way that it's written, right? Improvise to learn more and pull more out of your customer, like we were talking about. But don't skip over that word yet, even if you're uncomfortable with it, right? Practice it. Practice makes perfect, and you will we always talk about when you insert new systems, you've got to become a slave to your own systems that you implement. Otherwise, you wreck the entire system forever for your team, right? Because if you're not using it, if you're not insisting that the team use the entire system, then iterations start coming along, and before you know it, it falls apart on you. So use the system the way that it's built. Later on, iterate it and make it your own, right? You're going to learn things from this that then have you going through it and actually formulating new questions, better questions for the services that you offer. And hopefully we're doing that together. Hopefully this is a back and forth conversation. Okay, so next question is, what changes have you noticed since then? Okay, oh, I'm sorry. Before we get there, when did you notice the problem? When did you first notice the problem? Okay, again, the customer is going to have to think about that. They're not ready. They're not thinking that you're going to go into all of this detail and sitting down. So when did you first notice the problem? And they might have to sit there and go, and if it's a husband and wife, which hopefully it is, okay, or a couple, let's put it this way, all the decision makers, okay, because the decision maker, there may be a decision maker outside of family. It may be a grandparent and the father or mother, son or child, the child may be part of the decision-making process. And so if they're both sitting there, one person may begin to remember it one way, and the other says, no, remember, it started 2 years earlier when we noticed this, right? So take your time here. There's no reason, if it takes 30 minutes, great. If it takes 45 minutes, great. You're there to just get all the information that you can. And by you allowing them to go back and forth and talk about these things a little bit, it'll help you zero in on the real detail. And you'll be able to say, okay, so you noticed this then, but then you noticed this earlier. Okay, so we're putting the story together, right? We're putting a timeline together in some senses here as well. Now, what changes have you noticed since then? Okay, so it might be like, well, 2 years ago, we started seeing some seepage in the basement, or we started seeing that it was real humid every time that we went into the crawl space, and it hadn't been before that. And then what have you noticed since then? And they say, well, that's when we started to notice some odors. That's when we started to notice a little bit of mold growth down there when we were putting our Halloween decorations away, right? Those sorts of things begin to come out of this conversation. Really, is there anything else that you noticed about that? Did you notice any condensation forming maybe because you've got all your ductwork running under your house. Did you notice any condensation issues? How about corrosion issues, right? You can really become conversational with this. Draw your customer out. Care for your customer during this process. Now, what about the problem concerns you most? Well, if they're about to put their house on the market, it might be property value, right? The value of the property. It might be, boy, I know as soon as we have an inspection done on this house and this gets seen, it's going to become a part of the record of this property, and then no holds barred, right? The buyer's agent, the buyer, they're all going to use that as leverage against me, and I don't want that to happen, right? That might be their greatest concern. Or if it's long term, they might say, well, we want to turn this basement into a livable area for our family that's growing. We've got grandkids now. We want to have a living room down there so that we can enjoy them. But when it's time for them to go away, they can go away, right? So just kind of keep in mind that everybody's life situations are different. Really draw them out here and ask them what concerns you most. It might be multiple things. It might be all the above, right? We're looking to put the house on the market. We're looking to create a more livable area that, for the next family that's going to move in here and really build value into the property. Who knows what that answer is? Take your time. All right. So why do you want to fix the problem now? Did something happen recently? Did something change that's leading to this now? Like, again, it's a simple question, but why now? Why didn't you do this 2 years ago when you first saw it? Or as you noticed the mold growth, what prevented you from doing it at the time? It could be budget, right? 2 years ago, they may have been in a different financial situation. Now they may have a new job. They are just in a new point in life. They may be able to take out a home equity loan because 10 years ago they went through a bankruptcy. Who knows what it might be, right? But now we can understand why they want to fix it now. And then on top of that, what repairs have been attempted to the space in the past? They may have tried to do some things themselves. They may have tried to squirt bleach on it, or who knows what it is. But again, what attempts have been made? Has somebody else attempted something that may be a professional? What fixes were tried? What band-aids maybe were applied to this? And start, write those things down. How would you like to use the crawl space or basement? It's a crawl space. They may say for storage. It's a big crawl space. My mother happens to have a crawl space in one area. It's 12 feet tall, right? They might want to put walls down there and create a little, conditioned area for a workshop or something like that. In a basement, they may be going from an unconditioned basement to a conditioned basement. Just last night, we were at our local Chamber of Commerce meeting, and I was talking to one of our bankers over there, and we were talking about his basement. And they don't have any ductwork in that basement yet. It's been unconditioned to this point, and he's wanting to turn it into a conditioned space down there, but they've got seepage issues. And I said to him right away, well, the best long-term way to do this is from the outside first, right? Don't have somebody talk you into doing it from the inside if right now you can keep the water out from the outside. So he's doing that, of course. But then we started talking about conditioning that space, and we started talking about different ways of accomplishing that. And we went into a lot of detail, but it was, all kind of leads back to this, being a good listener and being, and throwing out some ideas and questions within those ideas to the customer at that point in time. Okay. What is most important to you about fixing it, right? Is the warranty that might be offered on service the most important thing? Is the price the most important thing? Price is always going to be a consideration, really value, right? People don't know that it's value, but ultimately, when you're comparing something, right, whether it's electronics or a car or something, one thing may be priced more highly than another, but if there's value there in the service, then you're going to be buying value over price most of the time. Is it a fast installation? Is there a reason to pick up the pace and really move on this, right? Let's understand their priorities when it comes to fixing it. And also, let's mention this. Is it a permanent fix? If they've tried to do all of these little things up until this point and they're just frustrated by it, permanence may be their number one priority. Okay, what professional advice have you received? Have you spoken with anybody else? What was that advice, right? This gives you an advantage. If you can understand, those who came before you, what they've talked about, right? We're not selling people here, right? We are really understanding from their vantage point and from all their experiences leading up to this day, what they have experienced overall, the conversations that they've had overall. So when you ask about other professional advice, you should become a sponge at that point in time, because the error that you don't want to make is not asking this question and then suggesting something that somebody else tried and failed, right? So get as much information about what other people have recommended and or done up to this point, so that again you can differentiate yourself. Why didn't you have them fix it? Okay, let them answer that question. Was it because they just didn't seem reputable? Did they not have insurance? Did they not have a certification? Was it just too expensive, right? Let them talk about why that happened. Don't be afraid to sit back and let there be a little silence also, right? It's okay to pause, just like that, right? It's okay to pause for a beat and let the person who you're talking about consider their response before they just deliver something to you. The best thing is a well-considered response. And during that process, zip it. Okay. Have you already budgeted for the project? It's a perfectly reasonable question. There are projects that I've wanted to complete in the past. I'm sure you're the exact same way. There are projects you've wanted to complete in the past, but you had no clue what it was going to cost. And you just need somebody to kind of ballpark you. That's okay, right? You might be there as the first person in the door building this relationship here, and they might just not know, because sometimes in projects there's like good, better, best, right? And all three of those areas represent value for your customer. But if you tell me one thing's going to cost 10,000, one's going to cost 15, and another's going to cost 20, and all that I have in my mind after I hear those numbers is budgeted $12,500 to this project, I might be thinking as a consumer, well, I can at least get the $10,000 service, but will they work with me to get the $15,000 service on $12,500, right? Think like a consumer in this case, right? And that's what people are thinking. Hey, there's always room for discounting, not necessarily from your standpoint, but from their standpoint, yes. And then other than yourself, who will be deciding how you fix the problem? If you got that uncle, right, or that parent, or that brother, that sister, who's like the expert at everything, right? You got to know about those people, because at some point you're probably going to be talking about them, and you don't want to be caught off guard when that happens. And in some cases, you may need to set up another time to come get with them, because you don't want to go through this project, all of this information, and have, what should have been a two-leg customer be a one-legger at this point in time, only to find out that this is a two-leg conversation, and maybe that person has more sway and influence than who you thought the decision maker was themselves. Do they think fixing it is equally important? If they're not there, you can't ask that person. You can't say, hey, Jude, are you equally committed to this? Do you think this is equally important for, Rebecca over here? And, so you have to ask that question. And when do you want to have the work done? This goes back to time frame. If they're my position right now, I want to put a new deck on my house. I live in Banner Elk, North Carolina. Right now, a hurricane, the winds and the rain from the hurricanes coming through here. And I would love if the deck on our house was going up this week. Guess what? It's going to be delayed a little bit, and it might even be till spring. But I might tell you, I'd like to do this, as soon as possible, within the next several weeks. I'd like to do this a month from now. Keep in mind, all the other responses from your customer up to this point are going to start helping you target this as well, right? But because it might tie into budget, it might tie into a home equity loan that they're taking off. And it may need to tie back into even something like a same as cash program that you offer yourself to your customer, so they've got 12 months to pay for it and those sorts of things. We'll talk more about that on the sales side later. But if you understand when they want to have the work done, now scheduling becomes much easier, right? Because all this information that you're gathering here goes into just scheduling the job later on. You said this, this, and this. Let's go ahead and schedule it. Here's what we have in our calendar. I said I wasn't going to talk about sales. Can't help it sometimes. All right, let's talk about clarity. So now once you've got the interview complete, they know you, there's rapport there, they feel comfortable with you. Now it's time to really find out what they're looking. Yeah, I can use the word accomplish. We're going to use it later on, but let's talk about what they want to accomplish, right? So the first question is, if mold is found, is remediation important today? You're going to see this word today continue to show up again and again, okay? But again, it is all about what they want in the here and now, right? Not something, some dream into the future. So when you're asking these questions, please, please, please don't skip the word today. So if mold is found, is remediation and prevention important today? Let them talk. If mold staining is found, is removal important today? Now, this helps you in a lot of ways because it begins to gear you toward services later on after you've done the inspection that you're going to offer to them, right? But you have to understand, you got to understand what's important to them in service before you can make any recommendations later on, or before you have your eyes from an inspection, from an inspection standpoint, in that basement or crawl space. You've got to know in advance what's important to your customer, because if a stain isn't important to them and it doesn't represent value, then why bring it up later? I mean, you can show them pictures, but they might say, yeah, as long as this passes clearance, I'm good, right? Or it might be the reverse, right? It might be, as long as it looks good, I don't care about passing some clearance test, right? Understand where your customer's at. If foundation efflorescence is found, is redensifying important today? Now, when we get over to taking them through education, we're going to talk more about that. But they might say here, well, what do you mean? Well, you might just want to say something like this: efflorescence. When efflorescence is found, this is actually sodium hydroxide in terms of and this is how I would say it. You don't have to say it this way. You could say this is just solids when moisture's moving from one side of the wall to the other over time, and those surfaces are those solids are depositing on the inside of the wall. It's just making the wall a little weaker, a little more brittle over time because it becomes a little more porous. So we just need to know, is redensifying these surfaces important to you today? And you might say, well, gosh, I didn't even know about that. Yes, absolutely. Redensifying those walls is important if you see efflorescence. Okay. Is a groundwater and seepage solution important today? If they're seeing seepage come in through walls, if they seeing water come up, under, vapor barrier, just moist there all the time, right? I might say, well, that's kind of one of the reasons I call you in here. Of course, it's important today. If exterior surfaces are porous, is weatherizing to prevent damage important today? We have that X4 ad before this that has all to do with weatherizing and or winterizing exteriors so that moisture can't begin to affect those surfaces. And again, it's another question thrown in there that they may not even been thinking about it, but they go, yeah, now that I think about it, all of that brick and everything is a mess out there. That stonework that I'm gonna, looks like I'm gonna have to redo in a couple of years. Yeah, if we could do something about that to prolong it, let's do that. So again, solutions in your mind should be, you should be thinking about some solutions now, not verbalizing those solutions, but all of these questions are going to take you a step closer and them a step closer. Is controlling moisture from the earth important today? And the follow-up question to that is, are you wanting a basic vapor barrier, or are you wanting to seal it off once and for all, right? They might just want a 6 mil back down there, right? That might represent value to them now. They might want a 20 mil in there. They may want to learn about a 10 mil that acts as a 20 mil. Who knows, where that goes, but again, let them to talk. And then, is minimizing outside water intrusion important today? Is a sump pump solution important for today's visit? And the follow-up is a solution to keep the space dry all the time important in case of power outages, storms, or electrical failures? And of course, that's going to battery backup systems. They may not realize what's all available. And when you ask these probing questions, they go, yeah, we have outages here. It seems like a couple of times a month. And I didn't even think about that being a potential problem or downside to this, but absolutely, we'd love to look at that solution. And then, if possible, is an insulation solution important for today's visit? Okay, that goes back to those cold floors and things like that. All right, so now that we've got that away, we're halfway home, right? We've got our interview accomplished. We've got our clarity accomplished. We know what's important to your customer, And now it's time for the inspection. Now, this can be done a couple of different ways, right? What you're seeing here is a paper model of this. Of course, this can be digitized. But what's important about this is a couple of different things. We're going to look at the space from both the exterior to know what forces are acting on the environment, perhaps from outside. Let's just take it could be a crawl space or a basement environment. Let's say right now they've got foundation vents, right? We're going to draw all this out, and that's why the right-hand side of this is a big piece of graph paper. And we go, okay, we draw all this out, and during our inspection, here's a deck and here's a front porch. And during our inspection, we're seeing all this evidence of mold, condensation, etc. And we see, oh, they've got vents under here. And that hot air that's building because the sun is beating down on that deck or that front porch all day long or for half the day is heating up the air underneath that deck. And now that air is coming into the crawl space or the basement through those vents in a colder area. And now we're getting condensation and increases in moisture content, right? It begins to tell a story. And here's where we're going to tell that story. Here's where we're going to tell that story back to your customer as well. So pictures become essential. Video, taking pictures of readings such as moisture content readings, humidity, all those sorts of things become essential. And being familiar with the right key terminology, okay? I can guarantee that your customer or your competitors are going to talk about temperature. They're going to talk about humidity, but do they know about dew point, where those two things come together? And now you're hitting dew point levels where condensation comes from that increases the moisture content of those substrates under that house, right? Use your knowledge of building science. If you don't have it, get it, right? Or talk to us about it. That's what we're here for, is to be a team with you. So if you have questions about this stuff, let's have a conversation about it, right? support@EnviroGuardDirect.com. Call us at 828-548-3900. We'll help you through these things. So anyway, going back to this inspection now, right? We're gathering all this information here in the form of pictures, graphs, marking where we see mold, water intrusion points, areas outside the exterior, and we've got checkoffs, right? Draw the foundation footprint, inspect guttering and downspouts. Why? Because if water's not moving away, it's moving toward. Note landscape grade on all four sides. Do we have a positive and negative grade? If we've got negative grades back into the house, no wonder they're having some seepage issues. Note Ryland test. If you don't know about the Ryland test, you saw it when we were talking about X4, where we can show befores and afters. You can actually measure how much moisture is going into a surface, and then after treatment, test it again for how little moisture is going into the surface, and then you can use that for ongoing service. Okay. Existing vents, the number and size of vents surrounding the house. Note flashing and caulking failure around doors, windows, all these intrusion points, and then note any access issues, right? Because they may need a new door or something of that nature as a replacement as well. We've got some really good friends up in Indiana who we've been working with for a long time, and I know that they in basements and in crawl spaces and things like that, they're always installing access in terms of doors, in terms of windows that are accessible. So just keep all of those things in mind. Note access. And then when we go into the interior inspection, note foundation cracks. And again, you're notating all these things in this graph and marking those as a key. And then you are also taking pictures of all this as well, because we've got a story to tell during the education side of things. Interior drywall cracks, if it's a finished space. Window and door operation issues. Maybe things are sticking. Maybe it's a little too loose. Note floor joist direction. That's going to assist you later on in your own services. Let's see. Note any obstacles. Again, that's going to be all service oriented, and it could be the height of a crawl space, or there's a lot of stuff down there. You need to tell your customer, hey, we can either take it out or you can. Of course, if we're going to take it out, there's going to be an extra charge for that. Note electrical, note plumbing, standing water, existing ventilation, moisture content, humidity levels, efflorescence, Moisture intrusion, foundation seepage, visible or structural damage, plumbing leaks, condensation, visible mold, odors. Inspect the vapor barrier and inspect the insulation. A lot of times in insulation, right, might see condensation. You pull that back, and then you might see mold either behind that insulation, maybe if it's been installed incorrectly, take a picture. Or you might just see, mold on what is exposed, but no mold underneath, right? So take a picture of all this stuff and be able to tell that story of what you found to your customer. And then finally, notate the foundation wall type and the height, the exterior wall types, joist types, subflooring types, mechanicals, total square footage, and total exterior linear feet. Okay? You've got that information down. Now it's time for step 4, the most important phase, and that is the accomplished list. When I learned about the accomplished list, it was a game changer. Okay? We've talked about the inspection. That makes sense. It makes sense to refine the conversation through clarity. And it makes sense to do inspection. But now when we come back to the customer, it's all about what they want to accomplish. Okay? So the way that this goes is you have to set the table before anything else. And what I mean by that is with your customer, you're going to say, we're going to build an accomplished list with you. Nothing goes on this accomplished list unless you want it to. So I'm going to ask you if you want me to add it to your accomplished list, and you can say yes or no. Okay, you're in control of your house. The only thing that that controls the price of what we're going to do is the size of your house and what do you want to put in it. I remember Jimmy Schaefer saying that at Market Makers, right? And maybe Jimmy's out there right now, man. You did an awesome job at Market Makers. I can't wait to see you soon. I'll see you actually next month at your place. So to the customer, next, outside of the size of the space and what you wanted, you control 100% what your services are going to be, what it's going to cost you. And that puts them in the driver's seat, right? So would you like me to add to your accomplished list fixed groundwater seepage? And they go, well, that's why I have you here for. Yes, please add that to my accomplished list. Okay, I'm going to add fixed groundwater seepage. Okay, next up, would you like me to add to your accomplished list control earth moisture? And they go, that's kind of, those two things go together. So absolutely, control earth moisture. Keep dry all the time. And again, remember Jimmy, talking about this, and it's kind of like that chuckle back to what you had before. Like, why would I have you in here if I didn't want to keep it dry all the time? And then when they learn that it's part of, a battery backup system or something like that, it makes sense. But again, you're relating to your customer. We're coming back to this again. You want me to add this to your accomplished list. Remember, your customers have seen everything now, from what you've discovered. Do you want me to add to your accomplished list strengthen and redensify foundation? They go, absolutely. I'm convinced that that's something that we need to do. Would you like me to add to your accomplished list control foundation seepage and fix walls? And they go, yep, without hesitation. Would you like me to add to your accomplished list prevent mold, rot, and odors? And they go, well, that's kind of what got you out here in the first place. Absolutely, get rid of it, prevent it from coming back. That needs to be a part of the accomplished list. And you go, do you want me to add to your accomplished list improve comfort and save energy? Now, they might start feeling like, man, I'm telling you to add every single thing to my accomplished list. And they might say something like, well, I want you to, but I'm really afraid of what all this is going to cost me, quite frankly, because I'm adding everything to the list. And now I'm beginning to feel a little bit nervous about this huge, estimate and things like that. And you just say, bring down the wall again. Hey, listen, we can come back to this. Okay. And, when we start putting this together for you, you're going to, you're in control of everything. So if there's a service that you want us to remove or something like that, don't worry about it. Like, you tell us what you want to accomplish. That's all we're going to list here today. But if you want us to come back to that because you're getting a little bit uncomfortable about the budget, that's fine. And if we get to that point where we've done the estimate, you go, oh, that wasn't so bad, we can come back and we can add this later on. And then we saw those areas where there's some floor joist problems that we think really need to be solved first with an engineer and then replaced. Would you like me to add to your accomplished list fixed floor joist? Now, your accomplished list could look like anything. Okay. By the way, they probably would say yes to that. But your accomplished list could be anything, but make sure you have one, is the point, right? Make sure that going into whatever the service location for service is, that you're ready to go to ask them these questions in a premeditated way so that they aren't having to guess at things and you aren't either. Okay. So that's the end, right? Once we've got the accomplished list, now it's time for the education process. Okay. And that's when we start getting into services and products and all those sorts of things that are going to come next, and being able to present information to them that solves their problem. But for today, we're going to wrap this up with the first 4 steps of the set sales process, which is the assessment phase, being what? The interview, clarify, inspect, and accomplish. Okay. So I hope that's helpful for everybody. Again, if you have questions, if you want to jump on a web meeting really quick and kind of analyze this for your own business, email us at support@enviroguarddirect.com. Call us at 828-548-3900. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything. Oh, next week, we're going to talk about preserving exterior surfaces and why it's important. So we're going to, we could say we're going to talk about X4. No, we're going to talk about your services, how we can help you become more profitable. If you've got issues with seasonality, how you can be a 12 out of 12 month business. And we're going to show you some solutions that your customers are going to love and that make your company a healthier, more robust, more profitable company now and in the years to come. So we thank you for spending time with us today. Again, thank you, veterans, for everything you've done to keep us free in this nation. We love you, and we will see you next week. Take care.